The idea of the Confederate flag for a lot of people is controversial. What I want to know is your opinion. Do you feel that the Confederate flag should be allowed to be worn or flown publicly, specifically like at a school like East? So thoughts? Anybody can open it up. I'm gonna give it to Drake Yost first though, because I know he's a opinionated young man. What are your opinions on the Confederate flag?
Absolutely. That's First Amendment right. I think that people are completely misinformed about how the flag was, like what the flag, like what it's like, how the war started. Completely a war on northern aggression. North was making unconstitutional and unfair taxes on the South to promote northern manufacturers, because the South's main export was cotton. The Britain manufacturers were like doing better than the North, and so they were selling their goods cheaper here in the U.S. So the North had 5 times more population than the South, so all political votes would go in favor of the North, obviously. And so they voted to put a tariff, like the tariff of 1825 by John Quincy Adams. And that tariff put taxes and made promoted the northern industries while also degrading the southern economies, which is unfair. And they didn't want unconstitutional and unfair treatment, so that's why the South signed the lease.
I find it ironic that people claim to be patriots when they fly that flag. The Confederates stabbed the Union in the back. They shot first, they murdered 500,000 American soldiers. And they argued that it was because of states' rights. I ask, states' rights to do what? What were we considering getting rid of at the time? Not guns, we weren't trying to raise taxes, it was slavery. We were trying to stop the expansion of slavery to the West. The Southern aristocracy panicked and left the Union. They said, we are not Americans, we are from the South, so we're starting our own country. And then they proceeded to launch numerous terrorist attacks against the Union, shooting at Fort Sumter, murdering 200 people in Lawrence, Kansas. The thing is, we evolved. The United States has evolved over the years. Our founding fathers made it so we could change. When the Union was trying to change the way slaves were treated, the Confederacy, as I said, stabbed us in the back and murdered 500,000 people. And to your argument that the Confederate flag didn't start out as racist, I disagree. Here is a direct quote from the Confederate Constitution. Other than this one bit, it is exactly the same as that of the United States. Quote, no bill or attainder ex post facto law or law denying or impairing the right of property in Negro slaves shall be passed. So it says, no matter what, we will keep our slaves. If the Confederates really were fighting for states' rights and were trying to preserve the United States, then why is this the one thing that they changed? If this wasn't key to the Civil War, why is this the one thing that they actually changed?
Early 1861, a group of Upper South Unionists and Northern leaders who hoped to arrest and reverse the secessionist frenzy in the Deep South proposed a 13th Amendment. One of the ironies in our history is the juxtaposition of this proposed 13th Amendment and the 13th Amendment that is in our Constitution. This proposed 13th Amendment forbade any future amendment that would empower Congress to abolish slavery or interfere with slavery in states where it already existed. The Corwin Amendment, so-called because Republican Congressman Thomas Corwin of Ohio introduced it in the House of Representatives, received the necessary two-thirds vote in both chambers of Congress, and on March 2nd, 1861, the outgoing President James Buchanan signed it as a symbolic gesture of support. The President has no role in this, but Buchanan signed it anyway. This action reflected the fact that in the early spring of 1861, a majority of white people in the free states, including Abraham Lincoln, were constitutional conservatives who believed the Republic's founding document prevented Congress from abolishing slavery in the southern states where it already had taken root. During his first weeks in August, Lincoln sent letters to each governor conveying the proposed amendment and calling attention to Buchanan's endorsement. By the end of May 1861, Kentucky, Ohio, and Rhode Island had ratified the amendment, and Maryland and Illinois later followed suit.
Do not understand the pride behind the Confederate flag. The Confederate flag was a response to slavery. They wanted to separate themselves from the United States because they didn't want to lose their cotton pickers. They didn't want to lose their slaves. Period. End of sentence. You can debate that it was about Lincoln wasn't on the ballot in certain states. Come on, let's get real, people. The Confederate flag, this is the origins. Sorry.
No, it should not be flying anywhere. It is part of history, yes. We all get that. We all know the pride that you have in the South. But there is a stink, and I'm not going to repeat what Rosie just said because she laid it out. You got to really come up and step up. This is a conversation that we've had for years.
A different kind of flag is raising tensions in the South Bay. A homeowner says his Confederate flag honors those who fought in the Civil War, but some people say it represents hate and it shouldn't be flying in the first place. KCAL 9's Lisa Siegel has that story.
Well, in the backyard of the home behind me is where the flag flew. Not the one you're looking at, but a Confederate battle flag. Some people say should not have been flying in the first place. In the backyard of the home of 74-year-old Joe Ryan, a Civil War historian flies an American flag, one the young Americans on the Union battle line at Gettysburg would have carried this day, July 4th. It came up as this flag came down 2 days ago. A Confederate battle flag, he says, represents the young men on the Confederate side. The flag, a replica of one he says they would have carried on the first day of battle. It's how he honors them.
They're responding to different flags as signals of which side's theirs and which side's not. But they're all Americans dying on the same battlefield.